Well, good evening ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Match Fishing TV, the new programme in which we're hoping to bring you all that's happening on the UK match scene week by week. I'm joined in the studio by the editor of Pole Fishing, Tom Scoley, and Matt Godfrey, Tom's assistant, and an England international. And who better to tell us who's catching, where they're catching, and how they're catching them. It's the end of the coarse fishing closed season for rivers and navigable canals, and the weekend just gone has seen some big events all over the country. And we're going to kick off talking about the Census challenge on the Gloucester Canal. Guys, you two were both there. How was it?
It was very hard, Roger, but the fishing was actually quite interesting, you know. One thing the Census challenge has come to be associated, for those who fished it for the last 3 years anyway, has been really, really difficult fishing. 3 years ago it was on the Great Ouse, near Littleport and 10 Mile Bank. Last year it was on the Soar. And there were actually a lot of blanks those 2 years. So this year was probably a slight improvement, because although a lot of people weighed in less than a kilo, it was tough. There weren't that many blanks, were there, Matt? Really?
No, they weren't. It's a tricky one because it's sort of the wrong time of year to be fishing natural venues, the end of the season. And I think we had it extra hard at the weekend because the Gloucester Canal's virtually attached to the River Severn, the tidal River Severn. And after a load of rain on Wednesday, the canal went really coloured, a lot of cold water, probably salty water went in it, and the fishing was incredibly hard.
It was. I mean, the interesting thing as well, which some of the local anglers told me might affect it, was actually a spring tide on Friday.
Yeah.
And that, I don't understand entirely how it all works, but obviously the tide affects a 7. It was a 7 bore on Friday night as well. And that affected the canal. So there was an awful lot of mucky coloured water coming in the bottom end. And it seemed to drop out as the practice sessions went on, certainly in the areas that I drew. But the really interesting thing about it was as well, how you could have, say, 20 pegs somewhere that'd be really coloured and walk 20 pegs down, it was virtually gin clear. It was ever so weird how it was all affected by it.
It's interesting that you talk about the high tide and the Severn being in flood and the 7 bore and the fact that some salt water might have come into the venue. The weekend before, I was up in Bridlington with Total Sea Fishing magazine, one of ours. I had a big event up there, and I was talking to some of the England international sea anglers, and they were fishing the bottom end of the Humber, and I said, well, will the floodwater affect it? And they said, and this will have bearing on what you guys have done, salt water floats. Sorry, salt water sinks, so it's not going to affect the fish on the bottom. If salt water sinks in the Gloucester Canal, the fish you're fishing for aren't going to want to be in it. They're going to want to get above it. So, you know, it will definitely have had an effect. It'll have more of an effect on a coarse fishery that's affected by salt water, brackish water, than it will for the sea anglers. So, interesting one.
Yeah, it was.
And so how did you guys get on? Matt?
Well, I think on a team front, Roger, it was a fantastic, very fair venue. You know, I don't think it could have been any fairer. No, I fished for the...
Can anybody guess which team won it? Before Matt gets there.
Fished for the Drennan Barnsley Blacks team, and it's fair to say we had 2 very good draws and 2 very good scores each day, and we managed to win it as a team, so really pleased about that. And I had a decent weekend myself. I ended up 3rd individual as well, a couple of section seconds. But
what sort of weights have you had for that, Matt?
The first day I had 4 kilo 800 and something, 4 kilo 850 or something like that. I caught some little skimmers and stuff on a long pole, some little fish, and I foul-hooked a big skimmer on my short line and got her in.
I've got to just say, stop him there, this big skimmer has been causing all sorts of controversy over the weekend, Roger, because Matt says a big skimmer. Lee Kerry said to me yesterday that Paul Dix has said he'd give him Bristol Angling Centre if that skimmer or bream wasn't at least £3.
So, that's a big skimmer, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very big skimmer.
More like a bream, some would say, like that.
But then I had £3.13 yesterday, really difficult. Drew in a little marina section, caught some little bleak, really scratched around. But I ended up 2nd again now, £3.13, so really hard. But I tell you what, on the team front, they snuck in, didn't they? One of the French teams. We had teams from France, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, the Channel Islands, so people from all over Europe, well, the world really. And we're at Census 28, B team came 2nd.
It was, yeah, the B team was 2nd. I think Census 28 proper were 6th. So, I mean, it really suited the French anglers though. There were loads of bleaking areas, a lot of small fish. And there was a lad in my section on the Saturday. It was Giles Cordain's lad, Alex.
Yeah.
And he fished, he caught, I think most fish caught in the section was about 10. And he had 60 odd. Only tiny little things like this. And I think he had just over a kilo with those fish.
Right.
But you know, that sort of experience of catching these little fish, shallow, on slop, that sort of thing, it stood him in brilliant stead, which is why it was so interesting.
But also for the bigger fish on the Gloucester Canal, I was always told by the locals that depth is absolutely critical, and presentation determines whether you catch or whether you don't on the Gloucester Canal. I mean, it's so deep, so close in some places that there are areas that you think are devoid of fish and they're not. You're just not doing it right, is the truth of the matter.
Yeah, definitely.
Individually?
Obviously, Matt was third. Rob Hewison, one of your old teammates, I believe, was second. Yeah. And the winner was a lad called Connor Brown, who some people may recognise because he was actually on The Apprentice a few years ago with his wreath business.
His funeral wreaths?
No, they're funeral
Christmas wreaths.
Christmas wreaths, like a happy wreaths.
Yeah.
Not miserable wreaths, happy wreaths.
It's quite a happy chappy.
Oh, he's the right character, isn't he?
He is. I tell you, we were in my section yesterday, and I actually got a little video of him putting his fish back. But I reckon he must have brought these roach with him because I haven't seen a great big roach in that canal. Well, certainly not as big as what he caught, but obviously Ireland's famous for big roach. And one of these fish he had, it was 1.5 pounds. And he had 4 or 5 others like that. He's fished absolutely brilliantly, and a lovely lad to boot. So it was great to see him. Great to see him.
Well done, Connor.
And what sort of weights he had over the 2 days? Has he 2 section wins he's had, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, just to explain the format, the 15 peg sections. Obviously there's 30 teams taking part, so it's 2 15 peg subsections in effect. And I think there was only him who won his section both days, wasn't there?
Yeah, Rob had a first and a second. I know I saw his post on Facebook.
Yeah.
And although he was slightly upset that he hadn't won it, I know he was absolutely over the moon that he'd finished second in such a prestige event.
Yeah. Oh, it's brilliant. I was gutted. I was 50 grams short of another point. Another point, I think I'd have been 4th or 5th.
Yeah.
And as it happened, I lost out on weight difference. But that's the nature of the venue, isn't it?
Must try harder.
I know, must go a bit quicker next time.
You're not very charitable, are you? I'd lock him out tonight, Tom. So, other big event for the weekend was Fishermania Round 3.
Yeah, that was at Hayfield Lakes near Doncaster. And we actually quite pally with the lad who won it.
Yeah, Chris Kitchen. Massive congratulations for qualifying.
He got £97 a carp on the pellet waddler, but there's actually a little bit of superstition going on here. And I'd like to just read something he put on Facebook, because I thought it was quite interesting and could lead to some debate really. But wow, what a week. A blank Wednesday at Viaduct, and on Wednesday it was the second Fishermania qualifier. Fish cake big time at Lindholme on Thursday. My rugby team got a whooping on the Friday. I'm not normally superstitious, however. My family lucky number is 17. I looked at my fish show ticket this morning and saw it was number 17. I commented in the draw queue that this was the case and hoped that it was good karma. And then I was even more gobsmacked when I drew peg 17 on Little Adams, the peg that actually won last year's qualifier. And then obviously Chris has gone on to win the qualifier.
And he's had £17 plus another £80, obviously, to win it. But the 17 was in there.
It was.
Yeah, well done, Chris.
Awesome. What do you think about superstition in angling like that? Do you think it's something you believe in, or?
I think all of us will say that we don't have any superstitions when it comes to fishing, but I think the truth of the matter is most of us do.
Definitely.
You know, I mean, whenever I was on the way to a match, if I saw a single magpie, I would drive around for hours looking for another one. Superstition is a great thing. It can make or break your day before you go. The thing about superstition is a lot of the time you can do something about it. If something goes wrong, if a black cat crosses your path or something, you can, like I used to do with the magpies, you can drive around and look for another one. So you might be late to your peg, but at least you can get it out of your head before you're all in. And you, what are yours?
Superstition, no belief whatsoever. Don't even go there. I just don't entertain it. I just figured quite early on in life that if I just gave it no time of day at all, I'd never have to get involved with it, and I've stuck by it. But I think karma's a big thing, which is slightly different in my opinion. I think if you try and do something good and help somebody, then it often pays. So quite an early match, one of the Maver pairs that we won some years ago. I remember there was an old bloke who was really struggling with his stuff. And I got a long walk anyway, but I thought, I'll do the good karma thing. So I wheeled his stuff to his peg for him, come all the way back, got mine. And I went on to, I don't know whether I won the section or was second, but anyway, we qualified, didn't we? And I thought, definitely helping that bloke out that got me that result. You know?
Yeah, I'm all for karma.
Yeah.
And Matt, you must have some superstitions.
I've got a few little ones, Roger. I never like to open a bag of ground bait upside down. I always think that's a little bit dodgy. I always make sure I open it the right way around. And the other morning when I left to go fishing, this is a scary one really, I thought I'll make myself a milky coffee in my flask, and I never ever have milky coffee. So I've warmed some milk up. I normally have it out of the kettle, you know, normal coffee, but I thought I'll do a milky one. Warmed some milk up on the hob, made my flask, and I also made one of them little travel cups.
I'm slightly worried about where this is going to end up.
No, honestly, and I've got in me, and I've locked the house up and everything, gone to get in my car, put my flask on my seat, and I've got my travel cup in my hand. And as I went to step in my car, I slipped and dropped my travel cup in the footwell of my car. It exploded and coffee went everywhere. So I had to go back in the house and open up the door and everything to get a towel. I've gone back in and I'd left the hob on in the house, and I just think that is scary. If I hadn't slipped, and what made me, there were nothing to slip on.
So you'll never make another cup of milky coffee?
I'm having
Because obviously the moral of that story is if you make yourself a cup of milky coffee, you'll leave the cooker on.
I couldn't believe it. So now I think definitely there's something in it.
Ladies and gentlemen, now you know what it takes to be an England international. Milky coffee all over the car. So, okay, so let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be talking about some of the big matches at the weekend and other events that have influenced the end of the coarse fishing close season. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. In the first half of the show, we were talking about the Census Challenge and the big team event of the weekend. There was another big team fixture on this weekend, the Herrenbrook teams of 4 at 120 pegs. And Tom, I understand it fished quite well.
It was absolutely awesome match. The top 10 weights were all over £100, which considering the time of year is massive, really. Jason Brown led the way, he won the match, he had £172.10. And his team, Maven Midlands Mango, which is a good name I thought, had 4 section wins, so they're comfortably in front in the league. But, I mean, Herrenbrook, the fishing up there, they've certainly the last, 8 years, it's been unbelievable. The turnouts are massive, all the events get a lot of popularity, and, there's a lot of F1s and carp there, isn't there?
You know, this time of year, top 10 in the match, all having £100, awesome fishing that, isn't it?
But you mentioned to me that Herrenbrook is one of those fisheries where if you go one season and go the next, draw the same peg, it might be slightly different. The work that they do there is quite incredible.
I think Neil Dale's so proactive in how he manages it. I'll give you an example. There's a big old lake there called the Match Lake. And the first time I went, which was probably 11 years ago, something like that, it was actually 2 lakes. One called the Specimen Lake, which was a big oval lake, and one called the Match Lake, which was a smaller one.
Separated by a long split of land.
Yeah, exactly. And then when I went again the second time, probably 4 years ago, it made them all into one. I'm like, wow, that's takes some work. He must have shifted a lot of land to do that. And now he's decided that he's going to put them all back together. So now the 2 lakes again, and the back arm one, which didn't fish very well when there were one big lake, is full of F1s. You know, so he really works hard at his fish rotation, and you know he reaps the rewards. He gets the anglers and gets the weights.
Brilliant. And Matt, there was not a huge match, but a very impressive match up in Lincolnshire on the River Ancon this weekend as well.
Yeah, it absolutely fished its brains out by the looks of the results. I mean, I think it was the River Ancon Winter League final round, quite a well-attended league, 40-odd pegs. And winner of the match this weekend was Rich Pulford, who weighed £57.4, caught some 9 bream, so they were big uns, from peg 41. And then I'm looking at the backup weights here, and we've got Andy Denny second with £27.10, Lee Harrison third with 26.7. Dave Brooks were fourth with £21.4. Dave had 2 tension a bream for that, so you can imagine how big some of them fish were. Probably had a few perch as well.
But the one that caught my eye in that result is that because of the foul weather we've had of late and all the rivers being coloured and up and running, even the canalised rivers like the Gloucester Canal, you know, they've had a lot of colour into them. You can predict that the bream are going to feed. But the weight there that caught my eye was that £26 for third Lee Harrison. Apparently that was all perch. Now, when you've got to catch an awful lot of perch to catch £26, even if they're big perch. And usually that would be a real clear water game. So, you know, I suspect the lobworm's been involved there, but that's a net of fish I would like to have seen.
Lovely, lovely net of fish. I know Lee is brilliant at that chopworm fishing. He likes to have 4 or 5 different spots on the go. And we've done quite a few features with him in pole fishing, and I think he just changes lines all the time, chases them around, and to catch £26 of them, perhaps they were shoaling up this time of year, won't they? Perch will be spawning.
Yeah, potentially heading towards that sort of time of year.
Yeah.
So.
Could be. But, Graham Bontoff won the league overall, though, didn't he, on the Ancombe? Dave Brooks was second and Lee Harrison were third. So Lee Harrison and Dave Brooks certainly proved their consistency.
Tell you what, I wouldn't mind a crack at that next year. Good
Sounds
venue,
good.
isn't it?
I've done features on there in the past, and it is a lovely venue. You know, it used to be an out-and-out punch water. Obviously now the bigger fish with the coloured water have come into the frame this weekend. But no, the Ancombe to me was always a venue that I liked visiting. And there was another really good match on the Bristol Avon just to round off the river season.
There was. I spoke to Kevin Dix earlier and he told me the result of this. It's fished its nuts off. John Williams won the match. He had £61 of bream. Nigel Wyatt had £50 odd pound of bream, £53 I think he said, and there were 2 £30 backup weights and some 20s. But the remarkable thing was there was also a £9 bream caught.
Wow.
That's not a skimmer, Tom. A £9 bream is not a skimmer.
Yeah, so they're not just one on the Gloucester Canal, there's one on there as well. It says that the biggest you've seen out there is £10.9, which again, it's a phenomenal size. I mean,
And it must take some getting in the flow of the Bristol Avon.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But that result leads me on. Okay, the coarse fishing close season finishes at midnight on March the 14th. The season finishes at midnight on March the 14th. So we're now heading into 3 months where you can't go on the rivers, you can't go on the navigable, on the open canals. Views on that? There's obviously a lot of fish coming from these venues. How do you guys feel about that? Matt?
I personally, I'm all for the close season. I think it's got that element of magic about having some time off lovely natural venues, and I think it stems from me being a kid. My nan and granddad had a caravan in Lincolnshire, and I always used to go up mid-June, wait for that season to open, and on 16th I'd be out there early morning with my granddad, and you get to your peg and all grass had grown up, no one had been there for weeks and weeks, chop yourself a peg out. And that first cast on the opening day, when it's not been fished for so long, just to think, what am I going to catch? I loved that sort of buzz and still sort of cling on to it a bit, so I'm all for it.
It's delightful to hear somebody as young as you speaking in those sort of terms about the close season. That's my view. I know, Tom, you feel slightly differently.
I'm going to upset you then, I'm afraid. I think it's a draconian law. I think it needs changing. I think what a lot of people forget about that law is that it means people can't fish legally in the closed season, and all the people you don't want on the bank still go, all the poachers, you know, all the people who fish illegally. And the other thing about it is, you know, I think the science behind it is a little bit dubious, to say the least, because everybody I talk to about fish behaviour sort of tells me that it's more to do with the temperatures and a lot of other factors. It's not
when they're
just the
actually
time
going to
of year.
start spawning, yeah.
Exactly. So it's almost based on a lot of theories that aren't necessarily relevant. And by the way, when you've got anglers on the bank, you know, as you say, you know, you've got the bank to maintain better, you've got less cormorants in theory in a lot of these places, which is such a massive problem now. Predation, these cormorants are doing so much damage to so many natural venues. So to just give them 3 months, you know, free rein to go where they want and eat what they want, while people can't fish it, I just think it's crazy. And another thing, this time of year, we're going into spring, it's probably my favourite time of year to go fishing this. You've got a lot of other anglers who are the same. A lot of anglers don't fish through the winter. They're dusting off the rods, dusting off everything. I'm thinking we'll go out. Now, the current system, closed season, they can't go on a river or canal, so probably going to go to the local commercial. Not that there's anything wrong with that, by the way. But as somebody who loves fishing natural venues, it'd be great if people could, you know, go on the river and canal and catch a few fish. So yeah, personally, I think get rid of it.
I kind of fall between the two stools. I've always been a staunch supporter of having a close season, and remember writing an editorial all those years ago when they did away with it and saying this, in my opinion, is the wrong move for angling. But not so much from the biological perspective. You know, as far as I'm concerned, if a fish is about to spawn, it's not going to go out for a snack anyway. My view is very similar to Matt's. I think the break gives the angler a chance to recharge his batteries. I think it gives the banks a chance to regrow. And also, I always used to think that June the 16th or June the 15th for the tackle industry was a real key event. It was like 2 Christmases in a year. Personally, I would like to see a close season on every venue, commercial or natural or whatever, but not necessarily when it is now. You know, maybe December, January, February, let's close everything down. Let's stop trampling the banks to pieces. Let's stop the mud bars that are out there, but at least give people a chance to recharge the batteries. It's my opinion. It's a debate that's, I don't think anglers are ever going to get it right. I think some people are going to be happy, some people are going to be unhappy. But it's just nice to be able to get out whenever you can.
It's interesting, you mentioned obviously for the tackle trade, you think maybe it was better to have it. I mean, I'm obviously before my time, but what did anglers used to do in the close season? Did they still used to go to Ireland, or did they go?
Ireland was huge, certainly, and there were a couple of areas within the UK where you could legally fish. For instance, the southwest, which of course is a very important part of the match scene now. Back then, back before the close season was abolished, the southwest and Lincolnshire, you could fish still waters.
Right.
And so anglers used to travel to there. They used to travel to Ireland. A lot of anglers used to take up trout fishing, stillwater trout fishing, fly fishing was much better for the tackle trade back then because every matchman, myself included, went fly fishing. We all went fly fishing during March, April, May, and then we got back to reel fishing in June. So, you know, it was good for the trade. But certainly Dave Harrell, were he sitting here, he'd probably have stabbed me by now.
He's on my side.
He is absolutely on your side. Okay. What have we got coming up this weekend, guys? Another round of Fishermania, I think?
Yeah, we've got a new venue next weekend. I don't believe the Fishermania's ever been out there before. It's Southampton, a place, it's actually quite close to Larford, isn't it, near Stourport area. It's a really prolific venue, I know that much. The fishing there is fantastic. So that'll be an interesting one. Second round of the Home Book League, the one that I mentioned that Jason Brown did so well in last weekend. And it's the final of the Lakeview MIDI Extreme Winter Series, and a lot of money up for grabs there. So we should have a lot to report on next week, I think.
Okay, you guys are off to Ireland, I believe.
We certainly are, Raj. About dinner time today, we'll be off, won't we?
Yeah.
So we're going to film the next issue of Pole Fishing Plus with Cathal Hughes. Really looking forward to seeing him
Cathal's
fish.
a great character. When he's been over to Evesham, he's a proper crowd pleaser.
A lot of people say if Cathal lived in England, he'd fish for the English men's team. So
Yeah.
I've never seen him fish, never even met Cathal properly before. So really looking forward
He's
to
a
that.
proper angler and he likes a drink. He'll look after you.
Nice.
Excellent.
And we're filming feeder the day after him, so we get to see him on the feeder and the pole.
Excellent. No, that'll be good. You guys, when you get back from Ireland, where are you fishing this weekend?
Not sure, are we yet?
I think I'm going to go to Herrenbrook Sunday in the teams of 4. I don't know if to go to Tunnel Barn Farm. For me now, obviously the close season, that's an end to my natural venue fishing. I'm going to have 4 or 5 months now of commercial fishing, I think. So I'm looking forward to it.
And you're just going to look for wherever the biggest payout is?
No. I might go to Tunnel for a couple of days, do a little bit of F1 fishing and a little bit of a change.
Well, I'm going to be working because I'm going to be trying to sell the magazines that you guys produce. I'm down at the big one in Farnborough. So I'll be there on Saturday and Sunday. If you get a chance, come along to the match fishing stand. Got some great offers on down there, and no doubt I shall see most of the guys that aren't going to be fishing with you because they're all working the weekend as well. Biggest event in the calendar, I think. Just before we close, we've got to mention Lee Thornton. He's now the 2016 Preston Innovations Matchman of the Year. I know you guys have worked with Lee quite a few times, and he's worked hard for this one.
Awesome. Brilliant guy. He's really been and seen and done it all, Lee, and he fished in the youth setup a couple of years before I sort of got into fishing, and then he's turned his hand to commercials. He's actually written a brilliant feature for us in our May issue, which comes out the first week in April. And it's all about consistency.
Yeah.
This is in Pole Fishing.
It's in Pole Fishing magazine. It's all about how his mental approach to it, and I took loads away from it.
I love that feature.
And the thing I like about Lee, Rog, he's not afraid to speak his mind. You know, he's ruffled a few feathers in the past with a few blogs he's done for us. He's quite outspoken, but Awesome angler, great character.
He's done it on some really good venues against some brilliant anglers, Partridge and venues around Manchester area. Took them apart, won loads of matches. He's a true winner.
Brilliant result. Well done, Lee. That's it for this week. We shall leave you with a few shots of Lee doing what he does best, and hopefully tune in again next week. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.